What began as a simple survival story about one man's road to redemption slowly turned into one of the most punishing film productions ever attempted. This is the shocking facts you haven't seen before from the 2015 movie The Revenant. At first, The Revenant wasn't planned as a punishing endurance film. The early idea was a survival story with emotional weight, but still within the limits of a normal production. A man seeks justice, a man endures the wilderness. That was the pitch. Everything changed when Alejandro González Iñárritu took control. He didn't want comfort, he didn't want efficiency. He wanted the truth even if it hurt. He believed that suffering had to be real for the audience to feel it. That belief reshaped the entire film. From that point on, every decision pushed the production toward hardship. Locations became harsher, schedules became tighter, safety nets were removed. What could have been a difficult shoot became one of the most demanding film productions ever attempted.
Bridger's telling the truth.
How's that?
Fitzgerald lied to him. He was just following orders.
Hugh Glass actually lived in the early 19th century. He was a fur trapper, trader, and explorer working deep in the American frontier. His life was violent, unstable, and dangerous long before the bear attack ever happened. Historical records describe Glass surviving a brutal mauling by a grizzly bear. His injuries were severe: broken bones, torn flesh, massive blood loss. Members of his expedition believed he would die and left him behind. What followed is what made him famous. Glass refused to accept death. He crawled and walked for weeks through wilderness, covering hundreds of miles to reach safety. The film heightens some moments, but the core survival story is grounded in fact. That reality gave the film its backbone. The bear itself was created using CGI by Industrial Light and Magic, but the realism came from obsession. Iñárritu didn't want a typical movie monster. He wanted an animal behaving exactly as a real bear would. He studied hours of footage. He analyzed movement patterns. He even consulted Werner Herzog, director of Grizzly Man, to understand how bears react when threatened. The goal was unpredictability, not choreography. That's why the scene feels uncomfortable. It doesn't cut away quickly. It doesn't soften the violence. The camera stays close. Viewers feel trapped, just like Hugh Glass. The scene is terrifying because it refuses to be cinematic in the usual sense.
Get to the boat! To the boat, sir! Move! Move!
The difficulty of filming The Revenant was not just about cold weather or long days. Some moments on set became genuinely dangerous, even by Hollywood standards. One outdoor battle sequence grew far beyond what was originally planned. What started with around 30 background actors grew to nearly 200 people moving at once. Horses, weapons, running bodies, and uneven ground all collided in real time. During this sequence, one actor was dragged across frozen ground while nearly naked as the camera followed the chaos around him. The terrain was rough, the temperature was low, the scene moved quickly, and control became difficult. Director Iñárritu later stated that he checked on the actor multiple times during the shoot, asking if he was okay. According to Iñárritu, the actor said he was fine and wanted to continue. Crew members, however, later claimed the actor was clearly in pain and struggling to endure the conditions. What cannot be denied is that the scene feels overwhelming on screen because it was overwhelming in reality. The chaos, the confusion, and the physical strain were not simulated. They were happening. One of the strictest rules on The Revenant was simple but extreme. Almost every scene had to be filmed using only natural light. Cinematographer Emanuel Lubetsky believed artificial lighting would break the illusion of survival, so the crew relied on sunlight, clouds, snow reflection, and firelight. That meant filming schedules were controlled by nature, not people. Some days they had only a short window to shoot. If the sun moved behind a mountain, the scene was over. Entire setups were abandoned because the light no longer felt right. The crew used advanced digital cameras that could capture detail in very low light. Even then, it was risky. The shadows were deep. Faces were often half-lit. The studio worried audiences wouldn't see enough. The Revenant is not a fantasy story. It's based on a real man named Hugh Glass, a frontiersman who lived in the early 1800s. Glass worked as a fur trapper and explorer in what was then an unforgiving and largely unmapped part of North America. Historical accounts agree on the core event. Glass was attacked by a grizzly bear and suffered massive injuries. His leg was broken, his back was torn apart, his ribs were crushed. Most people at the time believed survival was impossible. Members of his expedition stayed with him briefly, then left him behind, assuming he would die. Glass did not. He crawled and limped hundreds of miles towards safety with no medical care, limited food, and constant exposure to the elements. Real accounts suggest Glass may have been even more ruthless in his pursuit of survival. Real frontier survival wasn't gentle. Historical stories about Glass suggest a world where violence was common and mercy was rare. The frontier did not allow room for hesitation. Director Iñárritu chose to focus less on revenge and more on endurance. Leonardo DiCaprio did not prepare for this role in a normal way. He didn't rely on comfort, shortcuts, or controlled sets. Once filming began, the environment dictated everything, and the environment was brutal. Many scenes required him to stay outdoors for long periods with no shelter. Temperatures dropped far below freezing. Wind cut through clothing. Snow soaked into every layer. Once wet, there was no warming up quickly. The cold stayed with them. DiCaprio repeatedly entered icy rivers, sometimes waist deep, sometimes fully submerged. These were not quick shots. Cameras rolled while his body reacted naturally. Shaking hands, tight breathing, slowed movement. None of that was planned. It simply happened. Between takes, there was little relief. Crew members had to constantly monitor cast health because exposure added up over time. One scene might be survivable. Dozens were not. DiCaprio later explained that this role demanded endurance more than acting. His body carried exhaustion from one day to the next. That exhaustion is visible on screen because it never went away. DiCaprio continued anyway, not because it was safe, but because stopping would have meant delaying the entire production again. By the end, his performance had lost polish and energy in a way that worked perfectly for the character. Hugh Glass looked like a man running on instinct alone because the actor was too. The raw bison liver scene became famous, but it wasn't the hardest thing DiCaprio endured. He was offered a fake prop made to look real. He refused. He chose the real liver because he wanted the moment to feel authentic. The taste was intense. The texture was difficult. But the real challenge wasn't disgust. It was physical stress layered on top of an already exhausted body. During production, DiCaprio spent long hours exposed to freezing air and freezing water. He slept in cold conditions, and his body was constantly fighting to stay warm. Hypothermia was a real concern. Crew members watched for warning signs, slurred speech, loss of coordination. These weren't theoretical risks, they were daily realities. DiCaprio later said he could list dozens of moments that pushed him to his limit. Eating raw meat was only one among many. One outdoor battle scene grew beyond its original plan. What began with a small number of extras expanded into a massive sequence involving hundreds of people. During filming, an actor was dragged naked across the ground. Crew members later claimed the actor was in pain. Iñárritu denied that anyone was in danger and said he repeatedly checked on the actor's condition. Accounts differ. What is clear is that the scene pushed boundaries. It became one of the most debated moments of the production. After the shoot dragged on, exhaustion spread. Long days became longer. Schedules kept shifting. The weather never cooperated. Some crew members quit. Others were dismissed. Replacements had to be flown in and trained under extreme conditions. At one point, production halted for weeks. Leadership roles changed. Tension behind the camera grew heavier than the snow on set. The film stopped feeling like a job and started feeling like a test of endurance. Every delay made the remaining crew more tired, but quitting also meant abandoning months of effort. Those who stayed did so knowing the finish line was still far away. One of the quiet dangers on the Revenant came from who was in front of the camera, not just the environment. Many of the large-scale battle scenes did not rely on fully trained stunt performers. Instead, the production used local extras to fill out massive action sequences. These extras were placed in extreme conditions. Temperatures were far below freezing. The ground was uneven and slippery. Snow covered rocks and ice that couldn't always be seen. On top of that, scenes involved fast movement, charging horses, falling bodies, and weapons moving through tight spaces. In most Hollywood productions, this kind of setup would be avoided or heavily controlled. Studios usually rely on professional stunt teams trained to protect themselves in chaotic environments. The Revenant operated differently. Because the film demanded scale and realism, the production pushed forward with non-stunt extras in physically demanding situations. Safety measures existed, but the margin for error was thin. Cold slowed reaction time. Fatigue increased the risk. And nature did not pause for resets. The result is visible on screen. The chaos feels unpolished. Movements aren't perfectly timed. People stumble and hesitate. That rawness wasn't staged. It came from real people navigating real danger in real conditions.
All of the cast and Alejandro.
The theme of the film is survival and spiritual growth through physical pain.
He said you're going to be in pain and that's planned, and that he wanted to film that.
A strict natural light approach sounds artistic, but it also costs money. If you only shoot during certain light, you lose hours each day. If the weather ruins that light, you lose the whole day. Every delay means paying crews, transport gear, and keeping everyone housed and fed while waiting. Then add the relocation. Moving a production across continents is a budget bomb. Flights, cargo shipping, new locations, new safety measures, and new scheduling all stack up quickly. Reports estimated cost exceeding $100 million. Every delay meant more money spent. Still, the production pressed forward. Director Alejandro González Iñárritu acknowledged the cost, but believed the scale would be visible on screen. The budget became another risk the film was willing to take. Art first, numbers later. The bear attack is the scene most people remember, but what many don't realize is how carefully it was designed. Even though the bear was created digitally by ILM, the scene was treated as if a real animal were present. Director Iñárritu spent days studying real bear behavior. He didn't want a monster. He wanted an animal reacting out of fear and instinct. That meant understanding how a grizzly charges, how it pauses, how it uses its weight instead of speed. Iñárritu also spoke with filmmaker Werner Herzog, who had spent years observing bears while making Grizzly Man. The goal was to avoid exaggeration, just sudden violence and confusion. Leonardo DiCaprio rehearsed the scene repeatedly with stunt performers standing in for the bear's physical movement. Every grab, slam, and roll was mapped out. Even the way Glass tries to protect his face was intentional. Despite the strict natural light rule, one scene caused serious trouble. A campfire sequence looked beautiful at first, but strong winds made the flames jump up erratically. Shadows flickered wildly. Faces disappeared and reappeared too quickly. Lubetsky tried everything. He adjusted camera angles, he waited for calmer conditions. Nothing worked. Finally, he allowed a minimal solution. Hidden light bulbs were placed near the fire to stabilize the image. This wasn't done to brighten the scene, only to control it. That moment stands as the only time artificial light was used. One scene nearly broke the rule. The rule survived. The shoot for the Revenant grew longer and harder as time passed. Weather delays stacked up. Locations became unusable. Snow melted in places where the story demanded deep winter. Originally, filming took place in Canada. When temperatures rose and snow disappeared, the crew had no choice. They packed up and moved to Argentina to find colder conditions. This was not a small move. Equipment, cast, crew, and logistics all had to shift. Budgets expanded. Some actors had to leave because they couldn't commit to the extended timeline. Crew members also left. The working environment became tense. Alejandro González Iñárritu demanded precision and commitment. He believed every element had to match the vision exactly. The Revenant is not just a survival story. It's proof of how far filmmakers will go in the name of truth, even when the cost is extreme. If this shocked you, like, subscribe, and tell us which fact stayed with you the longest.